Hey, HannahMouse1 here. Welcome to a brand new series in which I'll be teaching you how to make a virtual pet game like Moshi Monsters or Club Penguin, all in Scratch. And up front, I want to tell you how I want this to be a very community-driven project. A lot of the creative decisions behind it were driven through the results of polls on my community tab, so make sure that you keep an eye on that to have a direct impact on my game. In this first episode, I'll be adding the basic gameplay loop of the pet getting hungry, you buying food for it, and then feeding it to get those hunger levels back up. One thing that you guys wanted to see was more of the art behind my process. I'm not going to give you guys a step-by-step on exactly how to make the sprites I used for this game or anything, but I will give you a rundown of the basics of how to use the vector editor, as well as a few art tips so that you can make your own sprites. And if you don't want to do the art for yourself, there will be a blank version of the game linked in the description so that you can code alongside me using the exact same sprites that I'm using. And I'll also throw a timestamp on the screen so that you can skip past the art whenever it crops up, or you can just use the chapters on the timeline. So if you want to skip over this first art tutorial, which is for the pet, go to the time on screen now. So for this game, I'll be making the art in the vector editor because that's the editor that you guys showed more interest in learning about, which wasn't a huge surprise to me because it's a lot less intuitive than the pixel art bitmap editor. And while I won't be doing a full tutorial in this video, I will be giving you the basics to hopefully help you guys make better art for your projects. And if you guys do want a full in-depth tutorial on how to use the editor, let me know and I'll happily make that for you guys. But basically how the editor works is that you draw in lines and shapes which are comprised of points or nodes and the lines in between them. You can move these points and decide whether you want the lines that meet there to be curved or pointy, and if you choose for it to be curved, you can adjust how even the curve is on each side of the point. You then layer these lines and shapes over each other, and you can shift which layers are on top or underneath which layers. Doing this, you can build up the layers to create your sprites. The pet that I'm making for this is a mouse because you guys wanted this game to be themed around the Hannah Mouse brand, and for this game I decided on a cartoony art style with bold outlines, bright colours and cell shading, and I'll be using the art style on all the assets for the entire game. One of the biggest rookie mistakes I see with game design is using inconsistent art, especially when people use a mishmash of different assets that they found online or in the Scratch library, for instance. I have zero issue with using pre-made assets, but please make sure that the art style is consistent throughout your game. If you're going 8-bit, all your art should be 8-bit. If you're going anime, all your art should be anime, and so on. I split the sprite into a body costume, which I called Body 1, and a head costume, Head 1. I also created versions of the head to reflect different emotions, so I made a 2-frame happy animation, making the mouse look happier by bringing everything upwards and adding extra shine to the eyes. These costumes are called Head 2 and 3. I also made costumes for the mouse looking increasingly miserable, doing the exact opposite effect to achieve this, dragging everything down and making the eyes flat and dead looking. These are called Head 4 and Head 5. But back to the code. We want to make it so that the mouse appears on the screen. First, we're going to drag in a when green flag is click block, which runs as soon as the game starts, and we'll attach a broadcast message 1 block to that. We'll use message 1 to contain our gameplay loop, so drag in a when I receive message 1 block, attach a switch costume to body 1 block to this, and then create clone of myself. Then right click the switch costume 2 block to duplicate both of the blocks we just added, and change the switch costume block to be switch costume to head 1. Then attach these after the first create this clone of myself block. Add a hide block to the when green flag is clicked block, then drag in a when I started the clone block, and add a show block to this. The mouse will now spawn in, but we should make sure that it spawns in the right place. So add a go to XY block to the start of the message 1 script. Let's set it to be 0 - 30 for now. Let's make it so that our pet can get hungry over time. Delete the existing variable, then click make a variable, call it hunger and click OK. Now make another variable, call it max hunger and click OK. Drag in a set max hunger 2 block and have that set to 20. Duplicate this and attach it to the old set max hunger 2 block and have it set hunger to max hunger. Attach both of these to the beginning of the message 1 script. I think that it would be cute for the pet to look sad if you let its hunger get too low, so drag in an if statement and attach it to the when I start as a clone block, and drag an equals operator into the condition space. Type head 1 into the right hand side and set the left hand side to be the costume name input block. Drag a forever loop into this statement. Anything in this loop will affect the pet's head but not the body. Add an if else function into this loop. Drag a greater than operator into the condition space and set the right hand side to be 0.5. Drag a division operator into the left hand side and set this to be hunger divided by max hunger. Within the if portion, switch costume to head 1. Right click to duplicate the if else statement and drag it into the else portion of the statement. Change the right hand side of the condition statement statement to be 0.25 and change the switch costume block to switch costume to head 4. Add another switch costume block into the else portion, this time switching it to head 5. The pet now looks sad when the hunger stat gets too low. We need to make it so that the hunger actually ticks down over time, and I want to write the code for this in the code space for the stage, so let's click over to that. Drag in a when I receive message 1 block and attach a forever loop to this. Then drag a wait block into this, and I'm going to set this to be 30 seconds. The lower you go, the faster your pet will become hungry. After this wait block, we want to change hunger by -1, then add an if statement, and drag a less than operator into the condition space. Set the right hand side to 0, and then drag a hunger variable into the left. Within this statement, set hunger to 0. This will make the hunger tick down over time. But the scratch variables are super ugly, so I'm going to spice this up with some fancy UI. Create a new sprite for this, and this will require a bit more art, so once again skip to the timestamp on screen if you aren't interested in that. But otherwise, we need 4 sprites for the hunger bar. The first will be the main design for the outside of the bar. I want to make it clear that this is hunger, so I made the icon a block of cheese on a brown background because, of course, we all know that mice love cheese. And once I was satisfied, I made the outline for the bar part by extending a rectangle from the right hand side of the icon, and because the visual style of this game is very soft, I curved off the end. I added a smaller rectangle inside of this, again with a curved end, and filled the space in between these two rectangles, leaving the middle gap empty. I called this costume Hunger Overlay. I duplicated this costume and renamed the copy Hunger Background, and for this costume I'm going to switch to bitmap because we need this costume to be pixel perfect. I drew in a rectangle that's just large enough to cover the empty space in the bar. I centered it so that the middle is on the crosshair in the center of the canvas, and I made the left hand side of the rectangle, right up to the middle, a lighter color. I then duplicated this costume twice, renaming the 2 new costumes to Hunger Bar 1 and Hunger Bar 2. For Hunger Bar 1, I erased the darker half of the bar, and for Hunger Bar 2, I erased the lighter half. But now onto the code, and the technique I'm using for this bar is one that I originally saw by Griffpatch, so I'll link that video down below. Drag in a when I receive message 1 block and attach a hide block to this. Then add a go to XY block with the coordinates x minus 120, y 146. Follow this with a switch costume to hunger background block, and then a create clone of myself. Right click the switch costume block to duplicate both it and the clone block. Change the costume in the duplicated block to be Hunger Bar 1, and then right click this switch costume block to duplicate it and change the costume in the new block to be Hunger Overlay. Then attach these to the message 1 script in the order that you made them. Drag in a when I started a clone block and attach a show block to this. Then attach an if statement and drag an equals operator into the condition space. Set the left hand side to be costume name and the right hand side to be Hunger Bar 1. Add a forever loop into this function and drag an if else function into this. Drag a less than operator into the condition space and a division operator into the left hand side. Set this division to be hunger over max hunger and type 0.5 into the left hand side. In the if portion, switch costume to Hunger Bar 2, and in the else portion, switch costume to Hunger Bar 1. Drag a set x2 block after the if else function. Into this, drag a minus operator and drag a multiplication operator into the right hand side of this. Drag a division operator into the left hand side of this and a mod operator into the left hand side of the division. Mod gives you the remainder when the first input is divided by the second. Drag an addition operator into the second value of this and set one side of the addition to be 1. Then drag hunger into the first empty input space and max hunger into the second. Then drag another division operator into the next empty input space and set this to be max hunger divided by 2. I then set the next empty input space to be 74 and the final one to 194. But note that if you're doing your own art, these values might have to change slightly based on the width of your bar. The hunger bar now smoothly adjusts to reflect the pet's hunger. Next, let's add in the ability to go to the shop and buy some food. I really quickly threw together an exit icon calling this costume exit, and this was super simple, so I won't get into the details on that here. Drag in a when I receive message 1 block and attach a hide block to this. Then add a go to XY block with the coordinates minus 210, 98. I then added a switch costume to exit block and then a create clone of myself block. Then drag in a when I start as a clone block and attach a show block to this. Add a forever loop and then an if else statement into this. Set the condition to be if touching mouse pointer. Drag a set size block into both the if and else portions of the function, with it being set to 120% in the if portion and 100 in the else portion. This gives the icon a nice satisfying mouse over effect. This will take us to a map page, but to do that we need a map. So let's draw that, and again skip to the timestamp if you don't want to see the art. I put up a poll a while back for you guys to decide on a theme for the setting, and it was really close between setting it in a supply closet and making it art themed. I think art eventually edged out, but I still decided to marry the two and set it in an art supply room of sorts. So I made the map background a really zoomed in portion of the floor of a room with a skirting board to signify that it's supposed to be up against a wall. I also made a new sprite and drew in a costume for the pet's home, which is a mouse hole in the skirting board, and I called it Home 1. I duplicated this costume, Home 2, and the only difference between these is that the new costume says the word home, and this will display when the icon is moused over. I always like to draw in the letters rather than using Scratch's inbuilt text feature, simply because I think Scratch's fonts are ugly. Drag in a when I receive message 1 block and attach a hide block to this. Then add a go to X0, Y0 block, a switch costume to Home 1 block, and a create clone of myself block. For now, detach the costume and clone block. We'll come back to that in just a mo, but for now, go back to the pet sprite and create a new variable. Call it open, and at the top of the when I receive message 1 script, set open to home. Go back to the map icon sprite, add a forever loop to the message 1 statement, and add a wait until block into this. Drag an equals operator into this with the left hand side set to open and the right hand side set to map. Then re-add the 2 blocks we removed earlier into here. Then add a when I start as a clone block and attach a show block to this, and then a forever loop. Add an if statement into this and drag a not operator into the condition space. Then copy the open equals map condition from the message 1 script and drag that into the empty input space. Drag and delete this clone block into the function. Add an if else function after the pre-existing if function. Drag a blank contains blank block into the condition of this and set the second input to be home. Set the first to be costume name. Drag an if else function into the if portion of that and set the condition to be if touching mouse pointer. In the if portion, switch costume to Home 2, else switch costume to Home 1. Then go back to the sprite with the exit icon and drag in a when this sprite is clicked block. Add an if statement into this and set the condition to be costume number is equal to 1. Within this function, set open to map. Then go back to the map sprite and add a switch backdrop to map block into the when I receive message 1 script. After the wait until block, switch to the pet sprite and add a switch backdrop to backdrop 1 block to the start of the message 1 script. Then encase everything after the go to block within a forever loop and add a wait until block to the start of the loop. Set the condition of this to be open equals home. We then need another when I start as a clone block with a forever loop attached to this and an if statement within the loop. Set the condition of this to be not open equals home. Within this function, delete this clone. Under the stats sprite, encase all of the switch costume 2 blocks and create clone of myself blocks within a forever loop, and add a wait until block into the start of this and set the condition to be open equals home. Add a when I start as a clone block with a forever loop attached to that and an if statement within the loop. Set the condition to be not open equals home and delete the clone within this function. Now under the icon sprite, encase the switch costume and clone blocks within a forever loop. Add a wait until block to the start of this with the condition open equals home. Add a function into the forever loop on the when I start as a clone script after the if else function and set the condition of this to be not open equals home. Within this function, delete this clone. Then go to the map sprite and add in a when this sprite is clicked block. Copy the if else function with the condition costume name contains home and attach the copy to our new script. Within the if portion, set open to home and switch backdrop to backdrop 1. And I almost forgot, we need to add a wait until block to each of the message 1 forever loops. Under the map sprite, we need the condition of this to be not open equals map. And under the pet sprite, the stat sprite, and the icon sprite, the condition should be not open equals home. This stops it endlessly cloning while on the page. Now let's add a grocery store to the map, and I'm going to theme this around an empty crayon box. Another tip for improving your game's art: if you're using similar colors across multiple sprites, it's best to use the color picker so that you're using the exact same color. So the color of the crayon box is the exact same yellow as the cheese and the hunger bar icon. Having a concise color palette can really help your game look more cohesive. And again, I need a base costume for this, grocery store 1, and a moused over version with the name of the location written next to it, grocery store 2. Right click the switch costume to Home 1 block in the when I receive message 1 forever loop to duplicate it, remove the wait until block and drag it in after the create clone of myself block. Change this new switch costume block to be switch costume to grocery store 1. Then duplicate the if else function with the condition costume name contains home. Change the condition to be costume name contains grocery store and change the switch costume block in the if portion to be grocery store 2 and the one in the else portion to be grocery store 1. Drag the new function into the empty else portion of the original. Then duplicate the if else function attached to the when the sprite is clicked block. Change the condition to be costume name contains grocery store, and within the if portion we want it to set open to grocery store. Drag it into the empty else portion of the original if else function. We need it to set the backdrop to the shop, but first we have to draw it, which I did, making it look like the inside of a yellow cardboard box with the design of the wall and the shading. I also made the art for a shopkeeper who's a little beaver. I made sure to keep the design style similar to the mouse pet, with a little bulbous body, an oversized head, beady eyes, and the bold outlines and cell shading. And once again I made sure to reuse colours as much as possible from the other sprites. I'd also love to hear any name suggestions that you have for this guy, so leave those in the comments. Call this costume Shopkeeper 1. Add a When I Receive Message 1 block to the Shopkeeper sprite. Attach a Go to XY block to this with the coordinate 0 minus 85, and then add a forever loop. Drag an if-else statement into this with the condition open equals shop. In the if portion, switch costume to Shopkeeper 1 and show, else hide. Oh sorry, this condition should be open equals grocery store, not shop. Then go back to the map sprite, and under when this sprite is click script, change the switch backdrop to block under the costume name contains grocery store condition to switch backdrop to grocery store. We also need a button to leave the shop, and I want to reuse the icon sprite that we used to exit the house. Create a new variable in this sprite for this sprite only called this open. At the start of the when I start as a clone script, set this open to open and change the condition of the if statement not open equals home to not open equals this open. Then go to the map sprite and add a broadcast block where it sets open to shop and create a new message called grocery store. Go back to the icon sprite and drag in a When I Receive Grocery Store block. Then take the go to block from the When I Receive Message 1 script and move it into the forever loop after the wait until open equals home block. Copy the go to block and attach it to the When I Receive Grocery Store script and change the Y value to be 150. Then add a switch costume to exit block and a create clone of myself block. But before we can buy anything, we need to add money to the game, so I made the UI for this in a new sprite. I made a coin icon, once again using the same yellows that we've used everywhere else, and attached this to a display bar in the same style as the hunger bar, but without the transparent section in the middle. I called this costume bar, and I then made the UI for the numbers 0 to 9, a decimal point, a plus sign, and the letters K, M, and B. We want the names of these to be whatever character they represent, and for the numbers 1 through 9, it's a good idea for the costume number to also match the number that the costume represents, as Scratch can get confused between costume names and numbers if there's overlap. Drag in a When I Receive Message 1 block. We then want to make a block, let's call it clone, and make sure that run without screen refresh is selected. Add our new clone block to the When I Receive Message 1 block. Attach a hide block to the define block for clone, as well as a switch costume to bar block. Then add a go to XY block with the coordinates 82, 145. Then create clone of myself. Add in a When I Start as a clone block and attach a show block to this. Attach a switch costume to 1 block to the end of the clone define script, as well as another go to block. I'll set the value once I get the clone showing properly, and then a repeat 5 times loop. Create a new variable for this sprite only and call it this value. Before the repeat loop, set this value to 1. Within the loop, create clone of myself, change x by 13 and change this value by 1. I added in a set x to 125 block before the repeat loop, and looking at it, I decided to change the change x by block to be 15. Feel free to play with the numbers so it works with your own assets if you're making your own. I also decided at this point to shorten the bar art, so we do need to change a few values. We can remove this second go to block because I realized that it's redundant. Change the x of the first go to block to be 100 and the value of the set x block to be 140. Now make a variable called money, then create a new block called display value, and then add a number or text input called value. Attach this to our When I Start as a clone script and add a money input into the input space. We actually want this block to be in a forever loop. Add an if else statement to the display define block. Drag a less than block into the condition space with the condition being this value is less than length of value. We want it to hide in the if portion and show in the else portion. I do this the wrong way around in the footage, I'll correct that in a moment. In case the forever loop that contains the display block in an if function with the condition not costume name equals bar. Here's where I correct a couple errors in this define block. We actually want the values in the condition to be in a greater than statement rather than a less than statement, with it hiding in the if portion and showing in the else portion. Add a switch costume to block into the else portion, and we want it to switch to letter this value of value. We need some extra code to display larger numbers, so in case the display block in the else portion of an if else function, and set the condition to be money is greater than 999. We're going to need another display block for this, but the value we need it to display is a little bit more complicated. We need a division operator setting it to read money over 1000 and drag it into the second input of a letter blank of blank block. We actually need 4 copies of this, with the first input of each being 1, 2, 3, and 4 respectively. Then take join operators and put one inside the other until there are 5 joined input spaces. Move the letter 1 block into the first space, the letter 2 block into the second, and so on, and set the final input to be K. Move this into the display block and insert that into the empty if statement. Encase this block in the if portion of an if else statement, duplicate the block and move it into the else portion. Set the condition to be letter 4 of money over 1000 is equal to a decimal point, and change the input for the display block in this to be only the first 3 letters of money over 1000 1000, and then K. Duplicate the if statement with the condition money is greater than 999 and change the condition to be money is greater than 999,999. Remove the display block from the else portion and move the if money is greater than 999 else function into the else portion. Move this into the forever loop, and anywhere it says money over 1,000 in the first if portion to be money over 1,000,000, and change the K to M's. We're going to repeat the process of copying the if else function and deleting everything in the else portion. This time we need it to be 999,999,999, and to change all of the money over a millions to be money over a billions and the M's to B's. Move the if else statement in the forever loop into the else portion of the new function and move the new function into the forever loop. We need to copy this and delete the else portion one last time, changing the condition to be 999,999,999,999. Remove the if else function from within the if portion and replace it with a display block. Set the value to be 999b+. Move the if else function from the forever loop into the else portion and move the new function into the forever loop. We can now accurately display money values up to 999 billion with a failsafe in case it gets any higher. Find the when I receive message 1 block and here set money to 500. Go back to the when I started a clone block and switch the positions of the if not costume name is equal to bar function and the forever loop so that the if function is within the loop, encasing all of the code that we just did. Then encase the if statement in the else portion of an if else function. Set the condition of this new function to be open is equal to map and add a hide block into the if portion and a show block into the else portion. I then made the art for 3 different food items, all variations of cheese. The basic cheese icon was super easy to make. I just made the existing cheese icon from the hunger bar a bit bigger. I then made an icon for cheese on toast and then one for mac and cheese, with the costume names being cheese, cheese on toast and mac and cheese respectively. We could add more food options in the future, but I think 3 will be enough to get this set up on a basic level. Drag in a when I receive grocery store block and a go to XY block with the coordinate -75 and 95. Attach a switch costume to cheese block. Then create a new block called clone with run without screen refresh selected and attach these 2 blocks to the clone's defined script. And attach a clone block to the when I receive grocery store script. Add a hide block to the start of the clone defined script and a create clone of myself block to the end. Add a repeat 2 times loop, and within this loop add a change x by 75 block, a next costume block and a create clone of myself block. Add a when I start as a clone block and attach a show block to this. And looking at it, I decided to change the x value in the first go to block to be -65 and the value in the change x by block to be 65. Attach a forever loop to the when I start as a clone script, and within this loop add an if statement. Set the condition of this to be not open is equal to grocery store, and within the function delete this clone. After this function add an if else function with the condition if touching mouse pointer. Add a set size block into both the if and else portions of the function, with the value for the block in the if portion being 110 and the one in the else portion being 100. We need the UI to display the costs for these, and I'm actually going to duplicate the money sprite and delete the code contained, as the costumes included provides a really good base for the UI. I had to create name labels for the 3 food items, trying to keep the font consistent to that used for the locations on the map, meaning rounded corners and writing everything in all caps. Drag in a when I receive message 1 block, and to this attach a hide block. We also need a when I receive grocery store block. To this attach a go to XY block and a switch costume to cheese block. Set the values of the go to block to be x0, y50, then create clone of myself. Drag in a when I start as a clone block and create a new variable called Mouseover. Add an if statement to the when I start as a clone block with a condition costume name is equal to cheese. Drag a forever loop into the function and add a if else statement into this. Set the condition to be Mouseover is equal to none. In the if portion of the function, hide, else show and switch costume to Mouseover. Go back to the food sprite and add in a when I receive message 1 script. To this attach a hide block and a set Mouseover to none block. Under the when I start as a clone block, add a set Mouseover to block to the if portion of the if touching mouse pointer else function. Have it set Mouseover to costume name. Add an if statement into the else portion of the function with the condition mouse pointer is equal to costume name. Within this function, set Mouseover to none. We need to be able to store information about the food, so create a list called food index. Add 3 values to this list: cheese, cheese on toast, and mac and cheese. Create another list called food prices. Add the values 1, 10, and 100 to this list. I added a coin icon to the UI sprite and attached a set y2 block to the grocery store script. Set this value to -15. Then copy a switch costume to block and a create clone of myself block. Have the costume block be set to switch costume to coin and attach these 2 blocks to the grocery store script. Copy the if statement attached to the when I start as a clone script and change the condition to to be costume name is equal to coin. Remove the switch costume block from the else portion and attach the statement to the when I start as a clone script. Going back to the grocery store script, I'm going to change the value of the set y block to 15 because that will look a bit better. We then need a new when I start as a clone block with a forever loop attached, and within this loop we need an if function with the condition not open is equal to grocery store. Within this function, delete this clone. And I still wasn't satisfied with the y position of the coin, so I changed it to 25. Go back to the when I receive grocery store script and copy a switch costume and create a clone of myself block. Change the costume to 1 and add a set this value to 1 block between these two blocks. Encase the create clone of myself block in a repeat 5 times loop and attach it to the end of the grocery store script. Add a change this value by 1 block into the loop. Go to the when I start as a clone script and copy the if costume name is equal to coin function. Change the condition to be costume name is equal to 1 and attach this new function to the end of the script. Go to the money sprite and drag the display function and the if else function under the when I start as a clone script within the if not costume name is equal to bar function into the UI sprite to copy these functions into that sprite. Go back to that sprite and find the function we just added to the when I start as a clone script. Remove the hide block from the else portion of the function and replace it with the if else function that we just copied in. I actually think that it might be beneficial to split this into its own custom block because we need this UI to display a range of values. So create a new block called write input and add a number or text input called input. Make sure run without screen refresh is selected. Move that if else function that we just put into the when I start as a clone script to the define function and add a write block into the now empty else function. Set the input to be item tag of Mouseover and food index of food prices. Then go to the write define script and anywhere that it has a money variable, replace it with input. Make a variable called displayed. Find the define block for display value and at the start of this set displayed to value. Go back to the when I start as a clone script. We need a set x block in the else portion and drag a multiplication operator into the condition space. Set the right hand side to 15 and for the left drag in a subtraction. For the subtraction we need it to read this value minus length of displayed over 2. Duplicate this set x2 block and remove the this value input. Replace it with negative 0.5 and move this block into the else function within the costume name is equal to coin function. Go back to the food sprite and make a list called owned foods. Under the when I receive message 1 script, delete all of owned foods and add a repeat loop after this. Set the number of repeats to be length of food index and within this loop add 0 to owned foods. Add in a when this sprite is clicked block and attach an if function to this. Drag a not operator into the condition space and a less than operator into that. Set the left hand side to be money and the right hand side to be item tag of costume name of food index of food prices. We need a change money by block and drag a multiplication operator into that. Set one side to be -1 and for the other, copy the item tag of costume name of food index of food prices input from the if statement and drag that in. Move that into the if function. We then need to replace item tag of costume name of food index of own foods with item tag of costume name of food index of own foods +1. You can now buy the food items. I thought that it would be cute for the shopkeeper to react when you hover over a food icon. It makes the screen a little less static. So I made the art for the shopkeeper looking up with his little paws in the air. The process for making him look happy was much the same as making the mouse pet look happy by showing emotion through the eyes. And to get the perspective to work so that he's looking upwards, I had to tilt the ears down with light patches of them higher in the ears. I also had him open his mouth like he's in awe. Within the shopkeeper sprite, encase the switch costume to shopkeeper 1 block in the if portion of an if else function. Set the condition to be Mouseover is equal to none, else switch costume to shopkeeper 2. Now let's sort out feeding the pet. I added the costume to the icon sprite called food, which is the small cheese icon. Within the sprite, add a change x by 50 block and attach a switch costume to cheese block and a create clone of myself block to this. Then drag this into the forever loop under the when I receive message 1 script before the final wait until function. And looking at this, I'm going to change the x value to be 55. It just looks a bit cleaner. Duplicate the if statement beneath the when this sprite is clicked block and change the condition to be costume number is equal to 2. Within the statement, set open to food and attach this function to the end of the when this sprite is clicked block. Then go back to the pet sprite and drag in an or function. Set one side of the or function to open equals food and the other to open equals home. Anywhere we have the condition open equals home or not open equals home, we want to replace it with open equals home or open equals food or not open equals home or open equals food respectively. Then go to the stats sprite. Repeat the process of dragging in an or block, setting it to be open equals home or open equals food and replacing any examples of open equals home with this new block. Then go to the icon sprite and duplicate the entire message 1 script. Remove the hide block and change both instances within the loop of open equals home to be open equals food. Then remove the change x by 55 block, the switch costume to food block and the subsequent create clone of myself block. Then go to the when this sprite is clicked click block, and in case the set open to map block in the costume number is equal to 1 script within an if else function. Copy and open is equal to home block into the empty condition space and change it to be open is equal to food. In this case, set open to home, else set open to map. Create a new message called food and add it to the costume number is equal to 2 if function. Go to the food sprite and duplicate the when I receive grocery store script and change the message receiver to be when I receive food. Then go to the when I start as a clone script and move the open is equal to grocery store condition from the not operator into an or operator and set the other side to open is equal to food. Drag the new or operator back into the not operator. I added another costume to the UI sprite called you have, which says exactly that. Within this sprite, duplicate the when I receive message 1 script, changing the message receiver to be when I receive food. Change the switch costume to coin block in this script to switch costume to you have. Go to the when I start as a clone script with all of the if statements attached and duplicate the costume name is equal to coin if statement. Change the condition to be costume name is equal to you have and add the if statement to the script. Go to the other when I start as a clone script and change the condition of the if statement to be not open is equal to grocery store or open is equal to food. Back on the other when I start as a clone block, find the costume name is equal to 1 if statement. Encase the right block into the if portion of an if else function and set the condition to be open is equal to grocery store. Then duplicate the right block and change the input value to be item tag of Mouseover of food index of owned foods. Drag that into the else function. Back in the costume name is equal to you have if statement, change the minus 0.5 value in the set x block to -3. Then go to the when I receive food script and change the value in the set y2 block to 30. And let's change it in the when I receive grocery store message too for consistency's sake. The position of the you have UI is still slightly wonky, so let's go back to the if costume name is equal to 1 function and move the set x2 block into the if portion of the if open is equal to grocery store statement. Duplicate the set x2 block and move everything in the left hand side of the multiplication into an addition operator with the other side being 1. Put that back into the set x block and drag the set x block into the else portion of the function. I'm actually going to change the 1 in the addition to a 2 because that looks a bit better and replace the -3 value in the set x2 block in the costume name is equal to you have function with -0.8, and that should more or less send to the UI. Go back to the when this sprite is clicked block and encase the entire script in the if portion of an if else function and set the condition to open is equal to grocery store. Duplicate the if statement from the if portion of an if else function. Duplicate the if statement from the if portion of the if else function and change the condition to be not item tag of costume name of food index of owned foods is equal to 0. Change the value that the item in owned food is changed by to be existing item -1 instead of +1. Then create a new list called food effects and add the values 1, 5 and 10 to the list. Switch the change money block within the function to be a change hunger block and change the value it changes by to be item tag of costume name and food index of food effects. Then add in an if statement with the condition hunger is greater than max hunger. Then add in a set hunger to max hunger. Then add in an or operator and set one side to hunger is equal to max hunger. For the other side, move in the item tag of costume name of food index of owned foods is equal to 0 condition from the not operator in the if statement and drag an or operator into the now empty not operator. Then go back to the pet sprite and find the when I start as a clone script that sets the pet's costume and move everything in the forever loop into the if portion of an if else function with the condition Mouseover is equal to none. Drag in another switch costume block and then a join block. Set the first join input to head and the second add an addition. For the left hand side of the addition, set it to floor of timer mod 2 and for the right hand side set it to 2. This makes the mouse react when you mouse over a food, but this animation's running a little slow for my taste, so I'll change it from floor of timer to floor of timer multiplied by 2. We also need to make a way of earning money, and for now I just wanted to tick up over time. Go to the workspace for the stage and drag in a change money by block. For the input, set it to floor of hunger over 5 and drag that block in above the change hunger by -1 block. Now let's add in a few basic sounds. Go to the icon sprite and add a pop sound to the beginning of the when this sprite is clicked script. Then go to the map sprite and again add a pop sound to the beginning of the when this sprite is clicked script. For the food sprite, add a key sound to when this sprite is clicked inside the if statement within the if portion of the if else statement and add an eat to sound to the one in the else portion. Obviously these names will change if you're using differently named sound assets to me. Next we're going to make the main menu. I made the backdrop for the main menu page and I couldn't think of a good game name, so I just called it My Virtual Mouse. I know we can do better, and let me know if you have any suggestions of what to call it. I also created a play button sprite in the same style as every other icon in the game. Drag in a when green flag is clicked block and attach a go to XY block to that with the coordinates x0, y0. Also add a show block and a switch backdrop to title screen block. Then go back to the pet sprite and remove the broadcast message 1 from the when green flag is clicked script. Go back to the play button script and add a forever loop to the green flag script. Drag an if-else statement into this loop and set the condition to be touching mouse pointer, and a set size 2 block in both the if and else portions, with the one in the if portion being set to 120 and the one in the else portion being set to 100. Add a set open to titles block to the beginning of the when green flag is clicked script. Then add a set mouse over to none block to the else portion of the if else function, and in the if portion set it to play. Then go back to the pet sprite and duplicate the go to block and the to switch costume and clone blocks from the message one forever loop. Attach this to the when green flag is clicked script and change the y value to be -50. Create a new variable for this sprite only called this open. Add a set this open to open block to the start of one of the when I start as a clone script, and where it says open is equal to home or open is equal to grocery store in the if statement that deletes the clone, replace it with open is equal to this open. We're actually going to change the y value of the go to block in the green flag script to -80. Go to the play button sprite and drag in a when this sprite is clicked block. To this, attach a broadcast message 1 block and a hide block, and a stop other scripts in this sprite block. I also used the title page to make a thumbnail sprite. The only code that we need for this is a when green flag is clicked script, and to that attach a hide block. When you save and close the project for the final time before sharing, make sure that the thumbnail is shown and at the position 00 with no other sprites on top. Whatever is on the stage at this time will be saved with the project thumbnail. Oh, one last thing I forgot to do. Back in the pet sprite, find the when I start as a clone script that affects the mouse's head costume, and drag the costume name is equal to head1 condition into an AND function. Set the other side to be not open equals titles. We also need to duplicate the message 1 script and make it so that the wait untils on one are open is equal to home and not open is equal to home, and in the other open is equal to food and not open is equal to food. And that's it for part 1 of this series. I'd love to hear what you'd like to see me add next to this project. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you enjoyed this slightly more relaxed style of tutorial. Normally I heavily plan everything ahead of time before recording, but this time I kind of coded along whilst recording so you could see the process of me making it. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed this. It lets me know there's something I want to see more of. Join the Discord link down below, and I'll see you next week with another video. Bye!